Good afternoon and welcome to the third masterclass CEDS IRL, or in real life. My name is Nancy Copa and I'm a member of the CEDS team, and we're very excited to have you here today. A couple of points that of just logistics. One, we are recording this session, so just want you to be aware. Also, if you attended the first two masterclass series sessions, we had everyone muted, so you couldn't unmute or anything. But at the end of this session, we're actually going to have a town hall. And so we have it set up today so that you do have the ability to unmute yourself, also to show your camera. We ask that you only do that when you are asking a question. And when we get to the town hall portion, we'll kind of go over the rules or parameters for how we're going to do that town hall. But in the meantime, if you can just double check, it looks like everybody's muted, but if you can just double check to make sure you are muted, because if you are unmuted, then we will hear that interference as the presenters are speaking. Okay. All right. So in case you missed it, we had the first masterclass on November 17th, so the week before Thanksgiving. And we have the YouTube video. It's available. Jackie's going to be posting that in the chat for you, so you can have that link. In addition, Masterclass 2, it was held last Thursday. That one was Behind Every Informed Data User is a Great Tech Stack. That link is also now available, so Jackie will be posting that one in there as well into the chat. And feel free to go back and take a look at those. In the meantime, just for today, so that we can kind of understand where folks are coming from, I am going to post a quick poll. You should be seeing that come through on your screen now, asking if you've attended either or both of the masterclass series. So I'm going to give you about 30 seconds to go ahead and answer that poll. Okay, it looks like I think most of you have answered now. All right, so I believe you can see the results on your screen, but I'm not 100% sure, so I'm just going to throw it out there for you. It looks like about half of you have either watched or were able to attend both of the master classes. That's awesome. If you weren't able to watch or attend either one, that's okay. Today is a standalone session, so it doesn't necessarily build on the particular information in the first two. So don't feel like you'll be lost by watching the ones today. Okay, let me just turn off the poll for you. So for today, what we're going to do is we're going to actually have two states speak today. The first one is going to be Michigan, and he's going to be speaking about expanding the data warehouse. We have Mike McGroarty with us today to speak on that. The second one is Mississippi, and we have Deborah Donovan, and she's going to be here speaking about moving CEDS forward and how that occurs. And then finally, with the remainder of the time for today, and today is planned to be a 90-minute session, so it'll go till half past the next hour for your time zone, we will have a town hall. So as we're going through today, as you're listening, you may already have some questions that you have in mind that you just want to get answered. Feel free to have those ready for the town hall. It also may be a comment, doesn't necessarily have to be a question. As you know, a town hall is not just a Q&A. It may just be a conversation or a comment, that sort of thing, to help others out. So just wanted to let you know about that in advance so that you have time to be thinking about it. And at that point, we will provide, as I mentioned before, some parameters on how we're going to do this so that everybody's not speaking at once, kind of thing. Okay, so with that, I already introduced our presenters in the agenda, so I think we're good there. With that, I'm going to actually turn it over to Mike. Mike?
Thank you, Nancy. Today, I'm going to be talking a little bit about Michigan's history with using CEDS and where we're heading. I'm also going to share a little bit about why we are focusing on CEDS and what we've been doing in this space. We really started on this journey in the early 2000s, building out our K-12 student staffing, school finance, directory, and infrastructure data collection systems. We did our compliance reporting using SQL, Excel, and whatever tools the analyst doing the work was familiar with, and nothing was really easily repeatable or transferable with those techniques. In 2009, we received a SLDS grant and an ERA grant that we used to put together the initial version of our centralized data repository and the My School Data website. We also put a SaaS environment in place to use for repeatable, reusable, and standardized data analysis and reporting processes. Since those grants, we've continued to expand the SLDS into post-secondary, early childhood, and even more K-12 data elements. And we've created connections to our workforce agency, Treasury, Department of Health and Human Services, state police, and other stakeholders. We've created a robust system that is often called on for answers. Uh, Despite its heavy use, it's become difficult to work with as the model has evolved over many years by different vendors, internal staff, and it requires in-depth knowledge of the structure and the layout of the tables and views. It's just not that well documented, and a lot of our knowledge of the system lies within our analysts' heads. The model expanded so much, so quickly, and by so many people that the data model documentation became an afterthought in many respects. The model is very complex and it's expensive to maintain. We spend a lot of time and effort adjusting, executing, testing, validating operational data loads and reporting processes, and it takes time away from our ability to be innovative and develop new ways to work with the data. We have several DBAs and a team of over 20 analysts who spend much of their time just keeping the system operational. And despite our best efforts, we still end up with multiple databases serving multiple different purposes, largely with duplicative data stored slightly differently in different places. Of primary concern is the fact that our My School Data database that supports the public and secure side reporting is a separate database from the main SLDS data model that we use for EdFacts and other compliance reporting and ad hoc analyses. This has both infrastructure and maintenance effort cost implications, and it's difficult to keep the two databases in alignment. Turnaround time on our unscheduled data requests and even our scheduled data pulls are not really where we want them to be. We'd like to be able to get the data out more quickly and continue to be relevant there. And it's difficult to find resources and plan for more complex data analysis and for things like leveraging new technologies like data mining, machine learning, and some more modern ways of using the data. So for a vision of what hopefully the not too distant future looks like in Michigan, we'd like to see the Michigan Data Hubs providing the ability for districts to directly send their data to the state through automated services, web services. The data hubs are EdFi operational data stores operated by a handful of our intermediate school districts, and they provide data services to the local districts that connect to each district's respective data systems. By implementing these web services, we could eliminate the need for manual upload of data to the state data systems each time we need to receive the data, as well as get the data into a standards-based format. Also, in our hopefully not too distant future, some of the historical data will be transformed and migrated into the CEDS data warehouse format. This is an activity we've largely been working on to date, but we envision other historical data remaining in its native format, but still being available for longitudinal queries and analysis alongside the CEDS formatted data. We want to be using open source ETLs, which carry the data from the operational data stores at the state into the CEDS data warehouse with minimal transformation, as we are leveraging standards at all points from data collection through to reporting. And dashboards, tools, and calculations developed by Michigan and other states will be leveraged and shared as an ever-expanding library of available reports and analyses become available to the states. And then Michigan and hopefully many other states will continue to contribute to the national body of work around the standards. So how are we using CEDS to arrive at this vision? Well, we started with what we know, and our CEDS data warehouse is currently being loaded with historical data across various subject areas. We do have our sights set on a phase 3 of our migration project, where our newly developed staffing data collection system that's being built on top of a CEDS model will have a CEDS data warehouse structure to send data to. And then within that phase, we will also be building reports on top of that. So with the idea that we will have an end-to-end CEDS solution in place. We're also improving our business processes and data management around the CEDS standard, working with local districts, vendors, and other stakeholders to assure them that standards are the way that they will be exchanging data with the state in the future. We've been building the capacity for the CEDS data warehouse within our own office at MDE and with other stakeholder groups like researchers. So that's sort of a shift, not really it takes some time to cultivate. So, and then we will also continue to contribute significant improvements to our CEDS data warehouse model. So the contributions that we're making and what does that kind of mean? So we're building out a data model, a data warehouse database, and we've been working to identify and fill gaps between our legacy Michigan data definitions and the CEDS definitions. Michigan has been following the internal Michigan and CEDS governance process and adding data elements to several domains. We've been filling in the holes in our model when we find them and making CEDS that much more of a robust standards-based model. We've also modified elements and eliminated elements from our model that we found not to serve a purpose anymore, which has been nice. So adding up the 59 elements we've added to the model through this process and the increased option sets and modified elements, Michigan has already had an impact on over 70 data elements, and that does not include our contributions we made prior to the CEDS data warehouse project, where we provided feedback and insight on just about every version of CEDS since version 1. This process of identifying and then resolving gaps between what you have today and the CEDS data model has been the most significant lift that we've experienced. I'd expect every state will need to have to endure this to at least some degree, so it's good to get an early start on that process. So why are we using CEDS? Or really, for the CEDS data warehouse, we wanted to build the CEDS data warehouse to be the back end for my school data, while also providing a platform for compliance reporting, researcher requests, and self-service analysis, all from one model. We ended up with a couple of models anyway, but they're a lot more similar and streamlined than our legacy models. We want to use Generate and the CEDS data warehouse for compliance reporting, so staff can be freed up to do deeper data analysis and respond to new inquiries. Right now, we spend a lot of time trying to interpret what the EdFact specs are asking for and how to translate that into our proprietary model. But moving to the standard can reduce or eliminate a lot of that guesswork and negotiation we end up doing with the program offices. Leveraging shared tools and analysis across states is also a big factor. Once other states are engaging and leveraging in the CEDS data warehouse and building tools against it, presumably we'd be able to share the code and documentation for those tools, or at least the logic used to build them, so we aren't starting from scratch at every ask. Most importantly, we want to leverage best practices, though. No one state has to go it alone and make things up as we go. We see the CEDS data warehouse as an opportunity to leverage the community of education data experts across the states and organizations to share the work and benefits as a whole. While continuing to share it with the community, we can also focus our resources on more innovation and modernization rather than spend so heavily on maintaining the legacy system. We can leverage best practices and methods already employed by the states or industries using a combined knowledge of several states and experts rather than continuing in an isolated way.
Mike, before we go on, we do have a question in the chat that I thought might be timely, and that is,
Okay.
Lisa has asked, how does using CEDS help interpreting EdFacts specifications? The CEDS option sets don't match EdFacts.
So that's where the CEDS Connect tool comes in, and where ultimately we'd like Generate to be able to provide is that the CEDS Connect tool allows you to build the recipes and have the published recipes for the different aggregates and calculations that we need. And then once we're all using the same ones, the Generate tool can then be built to spit those out if it sits on top of the CEDS data warehouse.
Thank you.
Yep. So what is the level of, what is our level of effort and our involvement in this? So to start with, Michigan hasn't received any special project funding for this work. We're using existing resources and funding from our operational budget to build the CEDS data warehouse. So progress may seem slow, but the work has been steadily ongoing, and occasionally we get to take some pretty big leaps despite the lack of additional funding. The big lift we've been focusing on is the build out of the CEDS data warehouse data model and the ETL processes. We've been loading the warehouse from our data sources like our legacy SLDS and our data collection application databases. In addition, we are focusing on the heavy lift of governance and learning new processes and how to migrate historical data into the CEDS data warehouse while ensuring all of our new data collection applications and the elements that we collect through them are already on the CEDS platform. We've also begun the development of Power BI reports against CEDS data sets. Ultimately, these reports will point to the semantic layer of our CEDS data warehouse, which I'll speak to in a moment. But Michigan is out in front in many aspects of CEDS and participates in as many of those work groups as we can. And we realize the importance of CEDS and what it will be able to accomplish for all of us. And so we've put all of our eggs into this one CEDS basket. So, and by that, we've really identified 4 main technical objectives to meet our modernization vision. A centralized data structure consolidates the models for our SLDS and our MySchoolData database and reduces our data footprint and increases the efficiency of our ETL reporting and analyses processes. The streamlined data transfer to reduce the time it takes to get the data through our data collection applications and out all the way through the warehouse and everything out to public reporting, while still maintaining the accuracy and quality of the results. A standards-based architecture where we're moving to the standard and providing opportunities for state-to-state collaboration and leveraging the best practices, as well as a unified reporting structure which aggregates where the aggregates and student level data are stored consistently in a common location, and where we're using a modernized tool set for data analysis and visualization. So this is a high level architecture diagram that I included to show some of the process flow. Might be hard to read, but I can share a higher resolution version after the presentation. The top in yellow boxes really represent national external processes that we leverage or participate in for governance and to get technical assistance. Below that are our Michigan areas of development and processes. In the boxes on the left there, we're trying to show here is there are many different avenues for our data. We've had to make a determination on whether we're going to pull data directly from our collection data source or from our legacy SLDS. And also we've needed to decide whether we are going to go through the staging environment or directly to the IDS, or even in some cases, we've gone directly to the data warehouse based on the source data's structure, stability, and its alignment with CEDS. We also want to consider which is the most streamlined approach given the state of the data. And as we transition from our legacy definitions and models to the CEDS definitions and models, the staging and IDS environments are where a lot of the mapping and conversion to CEDS takes place. And as we stand up the modernized data collection structures and receiving CEDS data from the districts, we expect that these environments will be replaced or could be replaced by the operational data stores of those systems. The data then moves to the CEDS data warehouse layer, which is standard Kimball star schema. And then from there, it moves into the semantic layer. And the semantic layer is where we denormalize and flatten the schema into a format better suited for the work our analysts do. We maintain both models because the star schema is a step towards enforcing referential integrity, and it provides a layer for some tools like Generate to sit on, while the semantic layer has additional rules and processing needed for other reporting and can't otherwise exist in the star schema. Semantic layer also allows us to customize specific user data sets and make subsets of the data stored within the data warehouse. It allows us to enforce security and access rights without giving individual level access, data warehouse access to everyone. So you might say, hey, Mike, you didn't want separate data models for storing your data. Well, you're right, but in these CEDS data models, the data are really similar. The formats are similar. We're using same naming conventions. And so it does make maintenance easier and streamlines our processes. Our website also, the MySQL data website also sits on an Azure cloud server, while our main CEDS data warehouse currently sits in on-prem environment. So performance between the two environment isn't optimal for online usage. So we do need to keep separate instances across the two environments, at least until we've completed the migration of the CEDS data warehouse to the cloud. So there's a lot else going on here in this diagram, but I'm going to hand it over to Deborah Donovan from Mississippi now. But please feel free to reach out to me afterwards if you have questions.
Thank you, Mike. So I'm Deborah Donovan from Mississippi, and here to tell you a bit about Mississippi's involvement with CEDS. So starting with a little bit of history and backstory, we have a current student information system. You'll see it, the acronym there on the screen, MSIS or MSIS. And our legacy system is about 20 years old and leaves a lot to be desired. We are just at the beginning of a modernization project, in development phase of that project. So a lot of the things that Mike talked about, we are working towards as well, and just in the planning and initial development phases. But when we were planning for our modernization project, these are some of the key things that we heard from users of our current system that made it challenging to use. And I should note that our current system is not based on any type of standard. 20 years ago, it was just built to meet Mississippi's needs at that time. Our users have difficulty understanding the data in MSIS. That's because the data that's displayed maybe doesn't relate to how they use the data locally, or the data goes through many different calculations or transformations in our current system, and it's hard for districts to understand how their data is being used. We also don't have a lot of documentation on the current system, especially from the business process side of things. We may be able to look in code and tell you why you're getting an error in the system, but we have no way to know what that means, what you should do to fix that error. And the system itself is just not user-friendly. It requires a Java installation. We've heard from many of our districts that they have one computer set up to run MSIS, and nobody else can touch it. So obviously that's not a well modern system. It also has some performance issues during some of our peak seasons, like right now. Data quality has been a really hard thing for us because, again, of that disconnect between what districts are sending up to the system. They send up monthly files to us right now. The errors that they get are hard to understand, hard to know what to fix, which kind of leads to people, maybe altering the files that they're sending versus making changes in their source system and letting that flow up to us through their exports. So data quality is really a challenge. Again, they reports that they get maybe months later from data that they submitted on the front end. So it's really hard to make sure and know what the impact of data that they're submitting is. And again, the reports that are coming out of the current system are not easy to understand as well. They're very static reports. Most of them were designed 20 years ago, and so a lot of the formatting and the way that the data is presented doesn't really fit with the modern uses of the data. So like I said, the original MSIS launched back in the year 2000. It was mostly designed to meet state and federal reporting requirements at the time. Over the years, in the past 20 years, every time someone needs to collect something new at the Mississippi Department of Education, we kind of add it to MSIS. That's kind of been the standard answer, which in some cases is good. That means we don't have, lots of different siloed data systems that we're trying to connect together, but it comes with its own challenges. Data gets added in without really consideration for what's already in the system, making good linkages. So it's really kind of become a dumping ground of data and become a little hard to use and get reliable answers out of as well. So realizing the need for all of the modernization efforts, we really started back in the year 2019 with what we call phase 1 of our modernization project. And that was an analysis of the current state of the project. This was not any development starting yet. We wanted to take 2 full years to analyze the current system, analyze our staff to see if we did a capacity and maturity model evaluation of our staff to understand where we needed to be able to support and build a new system. So we wanted to kind of get our own house in order before we started on a development phase of the project, which did kick off in 2022. So we've now selected a vendor to work with us to build the system. We've been collaborating with all of our district related vendors, so the student information systems that our districts have in the state, as well as some other related systems that we want to pull data from. And we also have a set of pilot districts that we're working with as we do prototypes and designs of the system to get their feedback on how the system is working. So we're really approaching this from an iterative model of, making small adjustments, taking it back, getting input from our stakeholders, and then coming back and adjusting and just doing that over and over again. So just to give you an idea of the things that are currently collected in our system and will be in the new system, the modernized system as well, you can see we have what you would typically imagine a student information system has, like attendance, enrollment, withdrawals, schedules, maybe assessment scores. But as well as that, we also capture a lot of other data elements and data domains that could maybe typically be in other systems in some states. That includes things like finance, um, federal programs data like Title I, migrant and homeless, special education data, CTE data. All of those different areas are captured in our current system. And you can see on the right-hand side of the screen just an example of some of the mini reports that are produced that rely on all of that data. So it is quite a large system that we're trying to rebuild from the ground up. So currently, Mississippi is using CEDS in two main streams of work, I would say. Obviously, I just was talking about our modernization project, so I'll get to that in a minute. But what we've been doing in the meantime is we are a state that's implementing Generate with our legacy data, that MSIS 1.0 system. And I can tell you right now that that has been a really valuable exercise for us, not only to improve our current reporting structures and our current EdFacts reporting, but if you're thinking about implementing CEDS, like on a larger scale in your state or your district, then like Generate offered us a really good entry point into working with CEDS because you're really getting your hands in the work, modeling things out, mapping your data, and really understanding how the CEDS model is structured. So it's been invaluable to inform what we're doing in our modernization project, as well as really easing some of that burden of EdFacts reporting for us now. So in the MSIS 2.0 project, again, we have two streams of work that generate work that will continue, but instead of pulling from our legacy data, we'll be pulling from the new system of data. And our actual entire new system that we're building from the ground up is based on CEDS. So that means from, if you think of a typical diagram where you have data coming in on the left-hand side and data going out on the right-hand side, we wanted to push CEDS as far to the left as possible. So we're asking our district vendors to submit data in CEDS formats so that we're collecting data from collection to reporting in that format. So just from an architecture point of view, you can see that we have, again, on the left-hand side, all of that data coming in. We are modernizing into an Azure cloud space using data lakes. So you see district and school data, as well as some of our MDE on-prem data, so data from other systems that we also house, like our licensure system, for an example, and a grants management system. Those are coming in via CEDS format into this data lake, which is the dotted blue box. Everything's contained in here. We're storing our data in Parquet format. So we're kind of moving away from a traditional database-based storage model. But you can see kind of in the middle of the screen, we have raw zone, clean zone, merge zone. So this is where data is going through data quality checks as it comes in. And then we also have a certification zone because we do have certain times of the year that we want districts to verify the data and certify that. And one of the big things that we're implementing there in that certification zone is giving districts impact reports. So, instead of kind of an old model that we have where a district would submit their monthly data and maybe 2 or 3 months later, they might be able to see an accountability score report or assessment scores or graduation rate calculations. We want them to be able to see that data as it builds in the system so they understand what the impact, and it really helps with giving districts an idea of data that may be missing from their data submissions or other data quality issues. And then all the way over to the right, data going out into reporting structures, and that does include Generate on that side. So why did Mississippi choose CEDS? What you see on the screen here, I went through our RFP that we put out for the development of our new data system and pulled these are snippets of language from the RFP. So you'll see one there that says, hey, we've decided that our data structure and our definitions should be based on CEDS. But the other items displayed here kind of give you an idea of why we chose that. Down at the bottom, we want to be able to share content that we build with other states and other agencies. One of the big benefits of CEDS is that we're not doing it alone. There's a great community to help us understand data processes. We want to achieve interoperability wherever we can, to have as many or as few transformations of the data as possible as it moves through our system. And also having a standard around our data encourages growth in our governance areas as well, because that means we all have to come together and talk about what it means, what these definitions mean, how it relates to how we do business in the state. So it's really gotten everyone really involved with the data systems and improved our governance structures as well. So what does this mean, boots on the ground, for us? So for that legacy generate project that I mentioned, we have about 3 core staff members working on that. One that spends a good bit of time responsible for mapping and doing data validation and helping coordinate with others in the agency to make sure that our results are coming out as they should. And about 2 other staff members who spend a bit less time working through moving our legacy data from MSIS 1.0 into our warehouse, getting it ready to get staged to go and to generate. We also have subject matter experts and other staff that participate in the sessions where we're trying to figure out when we have differences in numbers or business rules that we're not quite clear on, that participate in those on a ad hoc basis. Now, in our modernization project, of course, this is a large-scale project for us because we are building a system from the ground up. But some of the things we're doing is going through each data domain that we've defined, that we need. So again, going back to that one of the first screens where all that, with finance data, we have student data, we have staff data. Going through those, working through the definitions in CEDS, aligning those to not necessarily data elements that we have in our current system, but data needs that we have in our current system, because we're really being intentional about not rebuilding a badly designed system that we have now. So instead of doing like a one-to-one mapping of data elements that we collect now, we're doing that more based off of a need for use cases for the data. And of course, I mentioned we're trying to collect data from our districts in CEDS format, and we're doing that through JSON APIs. So we came to the CEDS community and said, hey, is anybody else doing this? This is something that we're thinking of developing with this modernization project. And it turns out that we had at least 2 other states join in on that. I believe Michigan is one of those states. Says, yeah, we're thinking about doing that too. So we started or put in a ticket to the CEDS community to start a work group around JSON XML in a CEDS format. So that's been working along very well. We're really excited about that work. It's helping us think through how we're modeling our new system, and really relates to hear from other states how they think of it, or how they are modeling their data, or think issues that they've run into in the past. And so there's a lot of great minds in that work group pushing that work forward. So we're really excited about that. And again, we're coming to the open source community all the time with items that we're collecting and that we see that I don't think we've come across anything yet that's like so specific to Mississippi that other states would not benefit from it. An example of a ticket that we have in right now is for board members, to know who are the board members for LEAs. So that's something that's not specific to Mississippi, and other states probably would have a need for that information, even though it's not part of a federal reporting component at the moment. So that's, an example of something we brought to the community and said, yeah, that sounds like a great idea. And so we're workshopping that with other states in the community to get that added to a future version of CEDS. And then, of course, we want to keep working with our Generate work. Our goal is to have a full suite of reporting out of Generate, getting all of our federal reports done. So we're really digging in on that project to help move that work forward as well.
Deborah, before we move on, Lisa has a question in the chat. She wants to know, does your state have multiple SIS?
So we have two main SISs. Yeah. In our state, we have Power School and one that's specific to Mississippi called SAMS by a company named Central Access. But we're also talking with other vendors like assessment vendors, special education, IEP platforms, finance and staff. So we have quite a lengthy vendor list.
Great, thank you.
And then I just wanted to kind of walk through what our, from a process level, not so much a technical level, how we're doing our data domain reviews. So this is from, starting off thinking about what we want to collect all the way to getting out the final specifications to our vendors. So we start with our vendor. You see there's a line called WWT Worldwide Technology is the vendor that's working with MTE. They start out with just, the base CEDS model for that data domain, and we model that out. People at MDE then take a look at that and give it a review. Then we generate an initial JSON for that data domain to then share with our vendors. And that gives the vendors an opportunity to review it and say, yes, we have this, we can supply this, or, what do you mean by this? To start fostering those conversations. At the same time, we're taking all that information to our data governance review committee, where we're looking at, what's missing from here. Like here's the base CEDS data domain. What unique state needs do we have that aren't captured here? Can we align this to something that's already in CEDS, or do we need to request an extension or an additional element to CEDS? And that's where you see, in that same kind of work stream, we might bring things to the CEDS open source community to review the model, working with those other states in that work group, or just submitting things as a result of that. We might move on to submit an extension to the open source community by submitting a ticket there. And then all of that at the same time, our vendor is reviewing what we've submitted and adding that to our model, drafting APIs, and putting it into our pipeline for submission. And all of that coalesces into getting a final update to the data model and up the pipeline, which just means how the data is going to move through our system. So once we've done that, we're able to send the final specifications out to the vendors who are working with our pilots, our pilot districts, to submit data for testing. And so we just loop through this process continuously with the hopes that we'll have a new system rolled out for school year 24-25.
Thank you, Deborah. Appreciate it. And thank you also to Mike for that. At this time, we are going to turn over to the town hall portion of today's session. We do have a couple of parameters just so everybody's not talking over each other. And that is, you can either put your question or comment in the chat. Feel free to do that. But also feel free to come off of mute and ask your question, and do that by just raising your hand so that in case we have a couple of people wanting to ask a question at the same time, we're not speaking over each other. And then if you'll just raise your hand, I can call on you. You can unmute. Feel free to show your camera as well and ask your question. I'll let you know that we do have a number of CEDS team members here to help answer, as well as you can ask questions both to Mike and to Deborah if you have questions for them. So while we are getting started, I would like to just circle back very quickly. And Emily, I'm going to let you know that I'm going to be calling on you to answer this. But earlier, Lisa had asked about how does using CEDS help with interpreting EDFAC specifications, and Mike gave a great answer to that, but was wondering if you could expand on that just a little bit for those that may not know what Connect is and how that quite works.
Absolutely. Thanks, Nancy, for the opportunity. And thank you, Mike, for being able to answer that question so well. Just to go a little bit further into that response, CEDS connections are basically the business rules for some of those EDFACS reports, but leveraging the Common Education Data Standards elements in those business rules. So instead of being just the what we typically get from like the file specification for EDFACS reporting from the department is specific to, just we need these, the department says we need these aggregate numbers. The CEDS connection goes all the way down to the unit record level, which is being able to say from these student records, these elements or these staff records, and these particular elements about a student or about the staff or about the program are used in combination in order to create the aggregates that get reported to the department. And so that can be really helpful, I think, in a couple of ways for states. You could leverage those connections and look at the business rules for a particular EDFACS report and compare it maybe to the way that your existing state business rules are written for that same report. Are there things that surprise you in that CEDS connection? Maybe the way that the information is being aggregated or counted isn't the same as how your state has done it historically, and could be worth some further investigation, because again, those connections are created in combination with peers and other states. You also could leverage that connection if you want to go one step farther by aligning your own source systems to the CEDS standard. So we talked a lot about align and connect in more detail in the second CEDS Masterclass Series webinar, the one we just had a little bit ago. And so if you need more feedback on that, that might be a resource. But aligning the source system will then also give you the ability to run a report to be able to see how your alignment, the elements that you use for creating those same EDFACS reports, how those match up and how those compare to the CEDS connection. Are you using all of the same elements? Are they from the right system? Again, an opportunity to maybe look more closely or in more detail at your own processes and your own business rules that you're currently using as a state in creating those EDFACS reports, and being able to compare yourself or at least see what other states are doing in terms of that connection, and that's been built off of the CEDS national standard that has a wide range of stakeholder engagement and stakeholder feedback in the building out of those connections. So just to kind of go a couple steps farther, maybe a couple additional ways that you could leverage the CEDS connections or CEDS to help with your EDFACS reporting. It was a great question.
Thank you. Mike McGordy, going to call on you now. Going to circle back to a question that Mike Reynolds had. Is the CEDS semantic layer open source?
So we do intend to publish the semantic layer model in the open source eventually. Right now, we are building it with a 32 character limitation, so it might not be as helpful or descriptive as it could be. But since we're leveraging the SAS tools and they've got a 32 character limit, so a semantic layer that someone else might build, you could go with longer field names and longer longer element names, which might be more helpful in providing a descriptive model. But we'd certainly be happy to share what we've got and let other people build off of that.
Great, thank you. And while I'm thinking of it, Mike and Deborah, do you mind dropping your email in or contact information or something into the chat so that if folks do want to follow up with you for things like this, that they would have that available to them? Okay, I'm now going to turn to Dwayne Brown to answer another question that has come in through the chat, and that is, does CEDS plan to incorporate non-binary genders in its data collection? Dwayne?
Sure thing. And then I want to do a quick follow-up on the semantic layer also.
Well, why don't you do that first, since everybody just heard
so
about that, and then we can jump over to the other.
Sure thing. Yeah. So semantic layer, when you're thinking about a star schema, basically allows you to kind of do whatever you want, but you would generally still utilize the warehouse data to build the semantic layer. So it's a way to be free to customize portions of data, but still using CEDS at the same time to get to that. There is you mentioned open source, making that available. We do have inside of the CEDS data warehouse what we consider to be a standard semantic layer. So Generate would be utilizing portions of that. So EDFACTS, the EDFACTS reporting and aggregates is a standard semantic layer. And so to get something in a semantic layer that's inside of CEDS that would be standard, it'd be something that everyone would agree to. A way of aggregating data, a way of putting data in a way of using data. And going back to that connection, if everyone agreed on a particular connection unrelated to federal reporting or state reporting, is like, we agree. Let's take an example of like average daily attendance and membership. If all SCAs agreed, this is the way that you should do average daily attendance and membership and create those aggregate numbers, we could then standardize that semantic layer. And that would then become part of CEDS's normally issued data warehouse. So the semantic layer that he talks about there, it just allows you to take and do what you want with the data and create various different numbers and aggregates of the data, but still using CEDS data to create that. So I just wanted to follow up with that even though it's custom, it could at some point become standard if the community agrees that they would like to see it become a standard part of CEDS. Okay, so on to the next question, planning to incorporate non-binary genders in the data collection. We've actually had a couple of work groups around this particular topic, looking at gender and sex and the elements that are already in CEDS. What currently there is federal reporting requirements, but then also what states are doing as far as requirements. And then we've also worked in conjunction with PESC, which is the Post-Secondary Electronic Standards Council. So if you think about, if you're familiar with EdFi or A4L, CIF at the K-12 level, then PESC is at the post-secondary level doing similar things. And so some work has been done there. There's been some talk about Data Standards United, which is a group of several different data standards looking at this. A decision hasn't been made yet as to far as what is going to be incorporated, but we've also taken a look at health. The health industry has the FHIR fire standard, an HL7, and there's some things going on over there that are standardizing certain elements there. So CEDS never wants to reinvent something that's already been done. So we're looking across various different standards organizations to see what they've already done, and then looking to incorporate either what's already been done, what's already been standardized, or continuing to have work groups around the topic. We don't presently have one planned. The last one, I believe, was probably in October, where we met with PESC at their conference in relation to what they were doing, and we're kind of waiting to see what Data Standards United may move that forward. But if not, just waiting to see from the stakeholder level if there's any stakeholders in the CEDS community that needs to have it move forward. There's a variety of different elements that may get added. I think health has 6 or 7 elements actually. And as we've done different research, there's a lot of different things to be looked at to make sure we get this right. So hopefully that answers. Work's being done, but is not yet complete.
Good. That was a great question. So thank you, Dwayne and LaJanice. Other questions that folks have? And wow, someone wants to know what's Dwayne's title. CEDS guru. Can that be the official title for Dwayne?
They change it on me all the time. I think it's OSC lead right now. I don't know.
Yes, it is.
I work on CEDS.
Which OSC is open source community. So, okay, while you are thinking of your questions, I'm going to do a quick quiz for you. It's one question, so it won't take long. And you get to check all that apply. But what do you do if you want to explore a new use case via CEDS? Nothing? You're on your own. Good luck. You gather like-minded colleagues to explore. You contact the CEDS team via email, or you notify the CEDS community by submitting an OSC ticket. I'll give you about 30 more seconds on this one. Okay, not seeing any more movement on it. So the correct answer is numbers 2 and 4. You can gather like-minded colleagues to explore, and you can or you can notify the community by submitting an OSC ticket. You can contact the CEDS team via email, but we're going to then reply to, you need to submit that to the OSC. So you can do it. It's just that we're going to then send you to the OSC. And the reason for that is because we don't want to be the holdup on you having conversations with your colleagues. Get those tickets into the OSC. Anybody can see them. They can comment on them without us being a bottleneck for that. And I did see a comment come into the chat. Can you talk more to how CEDS is transmitted over the wire in Mississippi? Or is there a project page for understanding how it works in terms of security, what the endpoints look like? Is it event driven? Does it support batch uploads? So Deborah, I'm going to call on you to answer that one.
Yeah, sure. So unfortunately, we don't have a project page up quite yet. Right now, we're just sharing via SharePoint with the vendors that we're working with, but we're hoping to get that out very soon. But yeah, what we're talking about now is, classified as a near real-time system. So we want data flowing in at least nightly, and more frequently when we are in certification time periods, where districts are trying to really review their data and make changes in their local systems that they want to see reflected, very shortly. They don't have to wait another day or for some overnight process to run to be able to see that. So these are API endpoints that we're setting up for the vendors to send data. So it'll be really heavy at the beginning of the year when they're sending all the information they're sending is new. But after that, the transmissions that they're sending would only be what we call deltas, or anything that has changed in their local system. So things like daily attendance will come up for almost every student, but schedule changes, discipline events and things like that, will only be reported when something's new or when something has changed. We do have, so that is our ideal data transmission. We kind of have a ladder because of course we can't force every vendor that a district has or is working with to develop APIs. Some of them may not have the capacity, or it may be cost prohibitive for those vendors and or the districts who might get that cost passed on to them. So that is our preferred method, and our main student information systems are on board with that and working with us to develop those. Our next preferred method is for a vendor to be able to create an export of a file for a district to upload. Maybe it's an automated transfer or something in a district may have to go in and upload a file. And then the The next less preferred method would be a district would fill out a template of data and upload it. And very last thing that we want to do is have to build manual interfaces where districts are keying in data. We want to save that for things that, maybe only get updated once a year, like a school's address or a district's address, something of that nature.
Okay, good. Mike, did that help answer your question? If it didn't, feel free to drop in the chat. All right, good. It did. I was going to say, feel free to drop in the chat if you have an additional question there, or come off mute, either one. You guys are welcome to come off mute. Okay, so next is from Ben, Cedar Labs. What advice do you have for SEAs and solution providers working together in terms of getting involved with CEDS, participation in working groups, the open source community, etc.? Dwayne, I am going to kick that one to you.
Yeah, so on that one, the best advice for getting involved is first to know probably what's going on. And that would be probably the OSC monthly meeting. We try, it's not a very long meeting. Sometimes it's only about 30 minutes long. Sometimes we have discussion items where we go a little longer, but once a month on the first Monday of every month, which will not be again until February. So January 2nd, I think, is the next one. I think that's a holiday, so we won't be meeting then. But the first Monday of every month in the afternoon, and you can go to the CEDS events page to get those dates. That we meet.
Jack is going to drop in right now in the chat.
And we essentially talk about everything that's happening in CEDS. We take a look at any new use cases that have been proposed where we're going to be making changes to CEDS. Talk about where that's at. We may have discussions around some elements or some things taking place, but then generally we just inform you about the EdFacts working group. I know there was a question about that in relation to generate and CEDS and file specifications. There's an EdFacts working group that's dealing with that right now. There was a question about the non-binary for gender. We had a work group, and that's where we would have announced that we're having that work group. We've had work groups around stakeholder things. Deborah Donovan mentioned board member. We had a work group where we talked about that. We had a work group around early childhood. We'll be announcing a new work group around another domain coming this spring. And so all the different things that are happening in CEDS, we gather all of that to this one meeting to tell you what is happening and what they're working on. So I'd say that's probably the best point of engagement right there to start. And then from there, you can get involved in any of the different things that are taking place or suggest things to begin work on.
Thanks, Dwayne. I just want to pause and see if Deborah, Mike, anybody else that has participated in the open source community or any of the work groups, which I'm recognizing a number of names on this webinar today. So I know a number of you have been participating in those work groups. Can any of you come off mute and speak to your experience about having participated in the work group or the open source community or getting involved in CEDS?
I will just say, don't hesitate to participate and speak up. Probably the core team of people that includes Dwayne and some other the CEDS staff are excited to share and excited to explore whatever you're trying to do in your state and figure out how CEDS can accomplish that or could accomplish it in the future. It can be a little intimidating, I think, coming from SEA, like if you're not, feel like you need to be an expert on it before you start engaging, but please don't feel that way. Just jump right in. Nobody's going to, look at you sideways for asking questions or anything like that. It really is a very open community and a great community.
Great, thank you, Deborah. Anybody else that's had experience with the communities?
Yeah, I'll just quickly. I'll agree with Deborah and say that this only works if everyone gets involved, or if folks get involved and speak out. And you know, it doesn't need to be just Mississippi and Michigan, you know, adding all these elements and changing elements to meet our own needs. I mean, it's a governance process, and it's a community to put all this work together. So yeah, additional input and insight is very much appreciated.
Thank you. Thanks, Mike. Anybody else want to jump in there? Okay. I will jump in there very quickly and just say thank you, Deborah and Mike, for bringing up that it is an open community where you can speak openly with your questions and your ideas on how maybe the elements should be defined or what elements should be in there. The goal is that we are working together, as both Deborah and Mike have described earlier. And the best way to do that is to have these conversations. I know in the early learning work group and the post-secondary work group that we have led on CEDS, those have been some of my favorite conversations when we look at maybe an element that someone has proposed and really dig in on, okay, what is the use case here? Does that meet what you all are doing in the field? Is this a one state thing? Is this something that would be applicable to everyone? Much like Deborah mentioned earlier in her presentation. And really wrestling with, okay, now that we figured out what the use case is, how do we capture that by creating a new element or using a set of existing elements to get at that information? And so we don't have all the answers. We are experts at what's in CEDS. We can tell you what's in CEDS. We do have experience with data collection or setting up data systems, that sort of thing, but we don't have all the answers. And so having the community to be able to speak to that information and come at it from different perspectives to make sure that we are hitting everything we possibly can and making sure that we're not excluding something as we're creating these elements or modifying existing ones is the only way to make this truly work and expand. So just wanted to throw that little bit in there as well. Okay, moving on, our next question is, how many states are on board currently with CEDS Generate? So Emily, I'm going to call on you about the Generate aspect. I can talk about CEDS, but I think this is more around Generate probably.
Thanks, Nancy. Great question again. So there are 20 states right now that either have received the intensive technical assistance from the Center for the Integration of IDEA Data, or CID, who actually created the Generate tool under that grant from OSEP. But there are several other states who have who are not currently receiving any assistance from us in order to implement Generate, but are implementing Generate or have downloaded it on their own. So it is, if sometimes folks engage with us, states engage with us and say, hey, we'd like to download Generate. We want to take a look at it, see if it might work for us. So there are a handful of other states who have downloaded it that may or may not be under some process of implementing, but they haven't, they are not currently receiving intensive technical assistance. We also have a handful of states who very recently, besides our pilot state, Nevada, but several other states who are actually just wrapping up their intensive technical assistance from us to implement Generate, because they've now implemented all of the files under IDEA that were within scope, and they're sustaining their use of Generate on their own and building out and moving on to other EDFACS reports. I guess my short and my long answer for that, because it's kind of complicated, right? Being a tool that states can leverage. We have about 20 states that at least have received intensive technical assistance from CID, or we're a pilot state that have Generate that we're actively involved with.
Thank you. Nothing like exactness to a bunch of folks interested in data collection. So perfect. As far as on the CEDS side, I can't be quite as exact, unfortunately. There are so many ways that you can interact with CEDS. So as far as Align, I can tell you that all but one state or territory, all but one state has created an Align map. So that's the data dictionary tool. It may or may not be shared publicly, but they have created it at one point in time or another. Several states, and I don't have the number on that unfortunately, but several states have created CEDS connections. So that's the one where you take a reporting requirement, a metric, a research question, something like that, priority area, and you break it down into what elements are required in order to answer that question. So several states have created those either on their own or as part of SLDS, Statewide Longitudinal Data System, SLDS, CEDS work groups. We've had a few of those over the years. So quite a few states have participated that way and developed connections. There's also work groups like we've been talking about just over the last 3 years. So since 2020, so that includes 2020, 2021, 2022, so 3 years. We've had more than 200 participants from 39 states and territories, and they've participated in everything from post-secondary, early learning, the JSON work group that's been mentioned, EdFacts work group that Emily talked about earlier with the EdFacts connections. We had one dedicated to researchers. We've had the one about the gender sex conversation. So more than 200 participants from 39 states and territories and 4 LEAs. So that's a great question. All right, other questions that you might have. Okay, well, I have a question for you. In the chat, I would love it if you could put in something about CEDS that answers this question. I'd love it if ... or it would be great if ... So I'm going to be quiet for about 30 seconds and let you mull that over, and then just drop it in the chat, whatever your thoughts are about, you know, I'd love it if CEDS did blah, blah, blah. Okay. Loving these. Okay, I'd love it if CEDS had a listserv. You are in luck, LaJanice, because we have just opened an account with MailChimp. So we will be sending out newsletters, announcements, things like that through that account. And so it will be much easier. We're getting those accounts loaded as we speak, so you can actually look for an announcement coming out. I'm not sure if it's going to be later this week or early next week, but one of the two. Look for that email to be coming out announcing a new work group, as Dwayne mentioned earlier. We're going to have a new work group starting in 2023, so that announcement will be coming out. Newsletters will be sent out that way, etc. So you can make sure that you're staying up to date. I know we had a few challenges using our Communities 360 in the past because sometimes it would inactivate you if you hadn't been on in a while, and so you might miss a message. So we are converting to that MailChimp, so you'll be able to get it there. It would be great if there was one website you could go to that organized everything about CEDS and Generate. That's a great comment. Unfortunately, we don't have that. I can tell you that there is the Generate, and Emily, if you want to, if you can maybe find and drop in the chat the Generate link, then folks will be able to see that. As far as everything about CEDS, it is ceds.ed.gov, and Jackie, if you can drop that in the chat for me as well. those two, everything about CEDS is there, including links to Communities 360, which is where the calendar is for events happening, as well as a link over to GitHub, which is where all the issue tickets come for the integrated data store and the data warehouse and all of that. So you can get it there. So it's really two websites you have to really know. You may want to bookmark GitHub or something like that, but it is available through the CEDS website. And one other one we got, still learning the process. I would like it if CEDS did a demonstration of some of the tools mentioned in the presentations. Excellent comment. Two things on that. One, we are planning on doing a set of webinars in the spring, so in 2023, around the tools. So to really kind of dive in and do a demonstration and have you follow along with some hands-on work. So we do have that coming in the works. The second thing is that if you are in need of that prior to the webinar actually occurring, please reach out to us at, oh, and I'm going to share my screen just to give you the email address, but don't go away yet because it's on the thank you page on the slideshow. But if you will email us at ceds@ed.gov, you can request a demo and we will be happy to customize a demonstration for you so that it fits. Maybe if you have a group of people that you want, we do that. We've done that for a number of states. We've done it for solution providers, LEAs, whoever you might be. We're happy to help with that. Okay, this was great feedback here. The final question, I guess it is a question. The final question I have for you all, and you can drop it in the chat, is one thing I learned during the masterclass series, whether that's that you participated today or you were able to watch either of the other two. Just name one thing. Even as a longtime CEDS team member, I've been working with CEDS since 2011, so that's what, 11 years now. I still learned more stuff even today, just listening to Deborah and Mike speak. So hopefully you learned at least one thing during the masterclass series. So go ahead and drop that in the chat, what you might have learned during this series. And again, I'll give you about 30 seconds where I'm quiet. Okay, got to tell you, I'm not feeling very hopeful about our masterclass series since apparently no one learned anything. Hopefully you did. Give you just a couple more seconds to drop something in the chat. Ah, Vasanthi, very good. Different resources out there. Vasanthi, you are one of our early learning work group members for those out there, so shout out to you. The tech stack session was very helpful. Yes, I learned a lot during that session as well, and I work on CEDS. It was good. Oh, great. It was good to hear how the data is being used by different states. Awesome. Loving these. Okay, well, one last chance for questions, comments. How can we get this class recording? Great question. Let me just pull up very quickly. So on the CEDS community page, This is where you will go to get to the events. So let me start with just CEDS itself, because I did mention earlier that you could access the community and GitHub from CEDS. So hopefully you're seeing my screen. If somebody can give me a reaction with a thumb up. Is that any kind of reactions at the top? Oh, perfect. Thank you, Ian. Okay, so on CEDS, which is ceds.ed.gov, if you scroll down below the lady on the computer, you will see the open source community. There you can get to GitHub, which is where you submit the issue tickets, right? And if you need an explanation on how to do that, check out Masterclass Series number 2, the tech stack one. The other piece is the CEDS communities. That is where, just click it. That is where you're going to find the events. Okay, that's our calendar is on there. There's other things on there too. That's where the previous newsletters are. A number of publications are available under the public domain clearinghouse, things like that. But the events is what you all will want. So you will just be able to click view all and you can find the particular date. And I'm going to go back to November because I know that one is there. The first Masterclass series under November. You can see here is the CEDS Masterclass 1, and it has a link for the recording of the webinar. The second Masterclass, which is December 8th, I will post the link to that webinar recording right after this session. So if you can give me like 10 minutes, it'll be up there. And so that'll be the second one. And then you have to give us just a few days to get this because we're taking these recordings and moving them to YouTube so that everyone can access them. And so it takes us a couple of days to get that YouTube link, and then we will be going back and uploading it to today's date. So you can go and look for the Masterclass series and you'll be able to find the recordings there. Okay. All right. Any final questions, comments? I have to say, I do love that you all now understand the Generate Tool reporting capabilities, how to join the OSC, that you appreciated the tech stack conversation. Feel free to watch these recordings again if you want to. Send them to somebody that you think might find them of value. As I mentioned before, our email address, ceds@ed.gov, is on there. Our website is ceds.ed.gov, so it's a little bit different, right? One is @ one is just a dot. And then the GitHub is listed there because we want you to recognize that if you just go to GitHub on your own, it's not CEDS, it's not Common Education Data Standards, it's a combo of that. It's CED standards with an S on the end, okay? So great. And then finally, Jackie has dropped in a link to a resource document. It has all of the links minus the links to the masterclass. Otherwise, it has all the links that we have been discussing over this series. So it has links to Align, Connect, the open source community, the events calendar, all of that stuff is available in this one resource document. So feel free to go there and download that and have it at your fingertips. So it'll help you kind of navigate. Finally, I want to say thank you to all of our presenters from the first, the second, and today's session. We really appreciate it. Hopefully you all have learned something. It looks like several of you have, so that's great. If you have any questions whatsoever, if you need any help, if you need a demo, as we mentioned before, feel free to drop us an email, ceds@ed.gov, and we will be happy to have that conversation with you, schedule the demo, whatever it might be. So thank you very much for your time today and over the last month during this series. We appreciate it, and we look forward to speaking with you in the future about CEDS. Thank you.